Welcome back to Ethos of Humanity. My name is Catania, and today I'm joined with Garth Lacombe, a proud Metis facilitator, healing circle keeper, father, husband, community leader, dedicated to helping individuals and families reconnect, heal, and thrive. For more than 15 years, Garth has been committed to his own healing journey, has held over nearly 600 healing sharing circles, creating space rooted in trust, authenticity, and meaningful connection. His work supporting fathers, men, women, youth, and families, combining lived experience, cultural teachings, storytelling, practical tools to help those build healthier communities and stronger relationships. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Catania. I'll start with a little bit of humor. I facilitated a gender-based violence event for the Métis Nation over this past weekend, and my wife came for one of the days, and she's looking through the pamphlet. She goes, "Wow, your bio is a lot longer than everybody else's." So we had a good chuckle. But yeah, everything in there is just something that's really close to my heart, from my family to the work that I do and the people that I'm in support of. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, if you're comfortable, if we want to start at the beginning, I would love to get a background of your story, where you grew up, kind of what led you
Yeah,
here.
for sure. So I'm the youngest of seven. I was born in St. Paul, Alberta, just east of Edmonton, and at around the age of 4, we moved out of St. Paul. My dad got transferred, so we kind of went out towards Edson, and then we ended up arriving in Slave Lake in 1979. So I grew up in Slave Lake, and right from a young age, I had challenges, and I didn't know what those challenges were, really up until a few years ago. So moving into a new town, away from relatives, but luckily I was young enough. And my first friend, actually, I had him for about a year, and then he passed away in a tragic accident. And I just started doing my schooling at a young age there in Slave, and navigating through that world. Grew up in a community where there wasn't a lot of culture, but surrounded by a lot of reserves, a lot of settlements and stuff like that. And I'm Métis. I have a long lineage of Métis roots. But I never knew what that meant. Yeah, to this day, I'm still figuring out what that looks like. And, I grew up with, I just want to say, and I mentioned it earlier about before we came on, about just acknowledging this is my viewpoint. This comes from me, not my siblings, not my family. This is my experience. And I think it's important to say that. But my dad he was an alcoholic, and my mom never drank. So from a young age, I watched my brothers and my dad go hunting, go fishing. And, there were 2 times that I remember at about the age of 6 or 7, where I went out with my dad and alcohol was involved. And I felt at a young age, I was put in a really uncomfortable situation. So it kind of, those 2 times kind of set me on the trajectory of, being far away from learning on the land and learning culture and those things. So I found sports, and, became heavily involved in playing in baseball and hockey and stuff like that. And from a young age, so I had red hair, I had freckles. I don't know if you can see them now, but, I was teased a lot and kind of had to find my way that way. And, I grew up, like I said, playing sports. And so I learned aggression from a young age, and that separation piece from my dad, when a parent, you don't have that acknowledgement. And, I was called things like mommy's boy, and, my siblings would call me Sally and cry, Sally, cry. So those are the things I kind of had to deal with. And, I remember being about 9 years old, playing street hockey with a friend, and we ended up getting in a fight. And my dad was watching, and he broke it up, and he looked at me, he said, "Get in the house." And I remember me going into the house, but he looked at me with almost like a level of pride, because, I got the best of my friend in the fight. And it was the first time that I saw my dad look at me with with that look of being proud of me. So I spent the next probably 35 years, drinking and fighting and trying to navigate through life. And every time, I did or got involved in that style of living, I had regrets, because I knew that wasn't who I was. And, fast forward to about the age of 34-ish, and I moved to Edmonton with my ex-wife and my daughter, and, looked to get into the Edmonton City Police, and passed all the training, all that stuff. And about 4 months into living in the city here, we got divorced. I got deferred from the police. So navigated through divorce, what that looked like being a present father, and worked really hard at maintaining a healthy relationship with my ex-wife and my daughter, and doing the best that I could. And, I'll kind of jump back to my parents. Even though my dad, he was an alcoholic, he was still very loving. He's given me a lot of gifts. He's passed now, but he's given me a lot of gifts on how to love my children and, be kind. And my mom, same type of thing. So I was brought up feeling loved. So we moved to the city, worked really hard at being a present father. And I think 2 or 3 years passed and I ended up meeting my current wife, and our son was born in 2010. And it was tough. It was tough to learn how to, spend those years being a father, being someone who had to be present for his daughter. But I was blessed to meet my current wife, and right out the door, we were working hard and struggling and trying to figure out what our relationship looked like. And we had our son. And from that point, we're still struggling. And about 2 years later, about 2012, things got to a point where, we weren't sure if we were going to stay together. And a really good friend of mine who I was a partner in a business with, he said to me, he goes, my wife and I are seeing this husband and wife out of Calgary, and there's this workshop this weekend that we can't go to. And you and April, my wife, you guys should go to it. And he knew the level of struggle we were going through. And for me, it was, faced with going through my second divorce and potentially, having my son maybe half the time again. So that was really hard. So luckily enough, my wife agreed, and we went to this workshop, and I think that was about the middle of 2012. And, it was something that really not only saved my life, saved our relationship, our marriage, but set me on a journey of sobriety as well. And I've been sober almost since then. And, at that point, we started what was one of, I believe to date is about 55 weekend workshops of healing in ceremony, and just learning from some beautiful teachers and mentors and people who attended. And along with that, we've done, I think it's 21 7-day workshops in Radium. So we've spent thousands of hours committed to our own healing and our own journey and repairing our relationships with our family, our children, our friends. And it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing. But I think it was probably the third or fourth workshop in, and I was sitting there and I'm looking around the room, and there was about 90, 96, 97% women, and the rest were the odd guy, right? So as blessed as I've been to learn and to be around some beautiful women and teachers, it was a problem for me because I knew our men needed it, right? Within my own family and myself. And so it was then where I didn't know what it looked like, because I was running a business that had nothing to do with this type of work or the work that I do now. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. So about 3 or 4 years in, or maybe it was a little longer, a really good friend of mine who worked with Pentero Traditional Healing Society, where I'm currently at right now, said, we have a position to work with fathers. And she goes, I don't know what your education is and whatever, but she goes, but I know what you've shared in workshop and what you want to do. And, she was, so you should apply. So, of course, I grew up, I wasn't classified as the top honor student and stuff like that. So, my education was, I had my grade 12 and stuff like that. So I was always hard on myself, feeling like I was lesser than, not intelligent enough and stuff like that. So when she proposed that idea, I said, yeah, for sure. So about 2 weeks went by. And I was downstairs. I remember this. I was watching the hockey game and I got a phone call, and it's her. And she said, I feel so bad. She said, I gave you the wrong email to apply to. And I said, oh, no, really? So we hung up the phone. She gave me the right email, and I got off the phone. And it was probably then that I really started to open my mind up to, I guess, sort of the universe, outer realm type thing. And so I yelled up to my wife and I said, April, I said, I need you to help me with my resume. So I sent in my resume, and about a week and a half go by, and I heard nothing. And we were literally, I think, 2 days before going to Radium for a 7-day workshop, and I got a phone call. And I got a phone call, and it was my first manager with Pentero, and she said, "Hey, we have your resume. I was away on holidays, and I want to know if you'd come in for an interview tomorrow." So I did. I went in, and we talked for 2 hours. We laughed, we cried, I shared my journey and what I've been through and how I saw things, and then you and I spoke a little bit before we came on air about giving back and stuff like that. So things were just really in alignment. So I left that day and I got to Radium, and on the Monday after, I went for lunch, and my mentor Henri, he was one of my references. And so anyway, I went to lunch and I got a phone call and I got offered the job. And so I come back from lunch and he pulls me aside and he said, I got a phone call at lunch. And he said, asked about, to speak about you and stuff like that, being your reference. And he said, I think I gave you a glowing review. And I said, well, you must have, because they offered me the job. And so I did the 7-day workshop with a lot of beautiful people, with Henri and his wife, beautiful wife, Val, who recently passed away in April. And, that was a tough loss, but coming back to starting with Bentero. Yeah, I came back and I started April 26, 2019 with Bentero, working in a program called Healthy Families, working with fathers. And I did that for about a year until the government got funny and ended some programs and stuff. And they created what they call a hub and spoke model. So everything kind of in one space. So, people don't have to jump on the bus, jump on the LRT, go here, go there. So it was kind of a one-stop shop mentality. And I applied for the position there called Dad's Engagement. And as you know, COVID was right around that time too. So I was doing one-on-one. I had a pretty heavy caseload, and I looked to my manager, Sherry, who's my new manager, and I said, what do you think about me facilitating circles? And she looked at me and she goes, here's the keys, drive the bus, so to speak. And I did. So I started that in 2020. And like you mentioned in the beginning, I've through COVID, I think I ran over 260 online men sharing circles, and there wasn't one time nobody showed up. And to date, it's been well over, I think it's 560. So I started doing that in 2020 and fell in love with it. I had all the support in the world, but it was what I knew. It was the space I knew. I sat back for, I don't know how many years it was to that point where I would watch my mentor Henri and his wife Val work with community, work with people in such grace and beauty and safety. And I watched and I learned as he did it. And there were so many times where it was like, how's he going to get through this? And he would get through it because, he had this way of just really being present with people and being honest and working in such a safe place. And, I often say him and Val were like the parents we all should have had, just providing that safety, that love, that leadership. And so, I started doing that at Bentero. About 2 years after, myself and another friend of mine who's a retired RCMP started a small company. And with the reason, all the while still with Bentero, with the reason being is that more places and spaces for our men. And so it was sharing circles and group work. And I've been doing that for the last 4.5 years as well. So I work with a few different communities or community agencies and organizations. I work facilitating a male youth group with Kickstand, who I know you're familiar with. And it's growing. So I'm thinking by the time this airs and people get to see it, my tenure with Bentero will be done. And the only reason that is because I want to jump into this depth of work that I'm doing in community 100%. And I've been carrying that load for about 4 years, and kind of things are starting to get too heavy. And, I owe so much to Bentero, and then they're like, a second family to me, and they've fostered my passion and my belief and support of men for the last 7 years. So it's going to be exciting moving forward because I think the doors are just going to open, and I'm just going to jump right in and see where it takes me. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Amazing. And everything that I'm gauging from you, I could feel very much how people can open up to you, and you can also meet people to that depth. And I feel like it's very synchronistic with the timing of everything because, come 2019, as the pandemic was approaching, I can only imagine the stories and, the holding space for people that really need it most, because it's been such a evolution the past 6 years, particularly for men trying to run a household, trying to take care of a family. I can only imagine the stories.
Yeah, it's been tough. And again, I never had the gift to be able to truly listen and be present for people. And again, it was just to actually sit and do that and just learn what that looked like, and just really try to do that within my own work. And all the while there's, being challenged with some of the toughest and emotionally hard stories from some of the toughest men you'll ever meet. But I found that those are usually the ones with the biggest hearts, right? So a lot to work with and a lot of challenging times, but I wouldn't change it for anything.
Being a photographer, videographer, I work a lot of conferences, a lot of retreats, a lot of like mental health and well-being workshops, events. And I do find there is a smaller demographic of men that come. And I think there is such an opportunity for events to be facilitated by men for men, because even the way that men and women heal is slightly different. Like a lot of women heal through eye to eye contact, very somatic, and that's why like the traditional therapy can often work really well for women. But men bond and heal very much so side by side with shared activity. So I'd be curious if you've experienced a lot on retreats and just kind of what you've learned over the last few years on how men particularly
Yeah,
heal.
it's interesting. So I can kind of throw two angles at it from a personal lens for me. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the retreats, a lot of the workshops, that I've done are not your typical workshops because they're literally in process. You get to actually do the practical work. And this is what I always say. So I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just I classify myself as the person who listens to all that wonderful, beautiful teachings and lessons and really put it to work. I'm just like, let's get it done. And from my perspective, working with women has been great, but there was something, and I'll get to it in the second piece, is that there was something that I wasn't able to work on, I guess is the best way to explain it. And, for the softness, the connection, the eye work that you mentioned, and the really, how you women really meet each other, right? And it's a beautiful gift. And I'm luckily to spend all that time, being surrounded by that. But I went to Bali in January. And the reason I went to Bali is last September, my wife found another retreat online through a podcast, ironically enough. And the retreat's called Sapience. And Sapience it's kind of based off of what they call spiral dynamics. And basically the quickest version of spiral dynamics is, if you just imagine a tornado and colors. And spiral dynamics, explained really quickly, is right from pre-verbal all the way to hopefully being in a space where you've really worked at all those levels, all those ages where, you are faced with the struggle and, repressing anger and everything in between. So really working and focusing on those levels. And so she went in September. And I don't want to share her story too much because it's hers. But when she came back and explained a little bit about that workshop and that retreat, I was curious because the first day it was like, I want to come home. The second day is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And knowing my wife, I was like, okay, now I'm curious. But the funny thing is with the work that I've done with Henri and what they call the Destiny program, being one of the only men, I got a lot of attention. Right. And I learned early on, it's like, okay, you guys got to stop this because it doesn't help me when I leave, because here we are together and I'm getting all the attention and we both know why. But so when she found this retreat, I kind of thought, okay, this is hers. I'm going to do anything. And so ironically enough, we went to Radium the next week and we came back, and my wife has really found a lot of her gifts. And she came from another room into the bedroom, and I'm sitting there. She was, I don't know why, but I'm feeling called to tell you that you need to go to Bali for the next retreat, because they do it in California. They do it in Bali. They're doing it in the Netherlands. They do it in New York. So they do it all over. The same gentleman who runs it and his partner. So anyway, she said this to me in my head. And like I said before we got on, or maybe I said it in the beginning, I can't remember, but I've been carrying a lot, working at Bentero full time, doing everything that I'm doing on the outside full time. And in my head, I'm going, I can't go to Bali. But I listened and I trusted her because I felt it was important. And so I did. I signed up, I think it was the next day, and I went out there and I did this retreat. And this is the first retreat that I've ever been to, this particular one, that the men outnumbered the women. And it was really weird for me. But anyway, I went in with the mentality of, I'm just going to be open to what shows itself. And about the third day in, we're in these little pods. We kind of break off into these little pods. And I had these two lovely ladies, and this really nice gentleman. And what that looked like was that you pick one person and you give them feedback based on what you think of them, what you've experienced with them. And the person's just supposed to sit there and receive it and try to not, feel like they're being attacked. So I was the first one picked, and the first lady says, your energy is really nice. I feel you're very trusting. And she kind of looked at me and she goes, but there's something there that you're not showing us. And it was almost like I was hit right in the chest. And so I was like, okay. So the next lady, literally pretty much the same thing. She was, I really love your energy, or, I feel you're safe. And she was, but she's right. There's something you're not showing us or that you're hiding. And so finally it gets to the last person, and it's a gentleman, and this gentleman is very cerebral. He really thinks, and he looks to me and he said, and I can't repeat his words because it was beautiful, but it was longer. And he looked at me and he goes, "I'm here for you, brother." And he goes, I know there's something that you're carrying. And so anyway, we had lunch. We came back, and throughout all the retreats, all the circles that I've been through in my life, anytime there's side noise and people interrupting or people are talking long, I really worked throughout those years to really not let it bother me. And so we come back from lunch and we're sitting in circle, and we kind of do a check-in, and with the intention to, this isn't where we talk about stories. We don't get stuck in there. Let's just do a check-in. And I'm sitting there and people are talking about stories and they're going, and so I'm starting to go, okay, like this is enough. And I hadn't done this for years. Had this energy, and I'm starting to get worked up, and I had two people beside me. They could feel it, put their hands on my legs, and I'm like, okay, like what's going on here? And I literally kind of looked up to the ceiling, and it was almost like there was like a lineage of the men in my family, my father. It was almost like they were jumping in, and I couldn't make sense of what was going on in that moment. And it's these types of things that I'm really starting to find that I'm integrating into who I am, and just being more connected spiritually and stuff like that. And so this was one of those times, and I couldn't make sense of what was going on. And then literally there's a bell rung, and then you can go into process whatever age, stage, situation you go into. Sometimes you meet somebody, sometimes it's on your own, and there's a whole big different aspect every time. And without, kind of sharing too much, I jumped up and literally said, with some language that I won't repeat here, basically saying, "You want to feel my rage? Here it is." And so I literally, for about 40 seconds, I met this gentleman from Australia who was huge, big man. And I met him in the middle, and I'm pushing and I'm screaming and I'm going through this space that I've never done. So I've been in, like I said earlier on, I've been in a lot of fights. I've been in a lot of physical altercation. This was a whole different level. And for about 40 seconds, I'm pushing this guy, and there's about 2 or 3 guys behind him. And then I just drop, and the main facilitator, Tom, comes around and literally picks me up, and he says, "You're not done." And so I get up, and growing up playing hockey and getting what we call bag skated is you give all your energy and you have nothing left in your legs, nothing, right? So at that point I was already feeling that. So I got up, and I'm at this next level of pushing, and there's about 4 or 5 guys now, and trying to keep everybody on the outside safe because, a lot of things are happening. And I crumble again, and he comes around again, and he picks me up, and he goes, "Garth," he goes, "You're not done." And I get up again, and for another 30, 40 seconds, I'm pushing. And by now I've got probably 7 guys that I'm pushing. And Tom, who's a big man himself, I see them, and they're looking at me, and I see this, and they're kind of wondering, like, what's going on? And then I crumble. And for the next 3 hours I laid there, and I was held, and I was supported. And, what I released that day was a level of anger and pain and things that I've carried in my chest for my life. And I thought it was all mine. So after sitting there and speaking to some really gifted, beautiful people who framed it like, it was about 30% mine. And then the rest was all these men that were with me, that were part of my family and my lineage, that needed to release this. And it was a piece that I wasn't able to release until I was surrounded by because I don't think I could have released that within the space of the women that, have been supporting me for the last 15, 14 years. And because I didn't think, now that I process it after, I didn't think they could manage that energy. And, I had all these beautiful men who were in service. And, it's been, I guess, 5 months, and that feeling hasn't come back. It's been scary. It's been vulnerable, because it's a big space there, but it's also beautiful. I'm not perfect. I still get geared up when I'm driving and stuff, but it's funny now because if I get annoyed at somebody's driving, there used to be a place I could go to inside of me, and it was that place where I would get the next level of anger or frustration, and it's not there anymore. So I kind of chuckle it off now. But yeah, I know that's one of those rambling moments, but it was huge for me, and it was just a confirmation for me to continue doing the work that I'm doing.
It resonates so much. I have, really dabbled into so many different modalities in my own healing journey, as I expect you and anyone in the audience that knows my story. I was raised as Jehovah's Witness. I'd left. And 10 years ago, when I was around 25, I lost my brother, my dad, and my grandpa to a combination between drugs, substance abuse, mental health, and suicide. And I tell you, like when I think about my male side, my male lineage side, the Tominski side, that's completely gone. I'm the last Tominski left. And I think about my mom's German World War II surviving side. And I think about all of that energy that's been brought forth to me. And I think there's like a part of you that has to be a victim of your circumstance so you can honor the pain. And I think I've kind of come full circle where I'm like wearing it now, where I'm like, this is ours. And I have a duty and a responsibility to heal that. And there's so many things that are coming to the surface now when it comes to the somatic and the psychosomatic. For myself, I worked a conference, funny enough, like I spoke with you. The minority were men. And I went up there and I was the photographer and videographer, but I took 15 minutes and I expressed in a very vulnerable and shaky way my Jehovah's Witness story. The scariest thing I could have shared. Women were not allowed to public speak. Women's rights were not a thing. And I came out the other side of that of, even speaking my truth is not shined well within the religious organization in itself. But I really wanted to not self-abandon for once in my life. And I just wanted to vocalize it. And it's crazy how my body shifted after that. And, I express as well. It's like, I'm not on a crusade to be a victim of my circumstance, but there is something to be said about giving voice to your pain in order to not carry it anymore.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a part of understanding it too, right? You gotta give voice to your pain because you need to understand it and to have that awareness, because I think over so many generations, men and women, we've just buried it, whether it was war, whether it was residential schools, whether it was famine or the Great Depression. I mean, it's survival. So that stuff becomes secondary, sometimes not even secondary. It's just dismissed altogether. So it's a huge part of understanding it and stepping into it, like you said, is, when you talk about being shaky, that's what it is. It's the fear of the unknown. How's this going to be received? How is this going to be, taken from other people, right?
Yeah, and I can totally admit there's been healing on with like the feminine side of my life, the feminine ancestral part of my life. Like I have a sister I don't have a relationship with because she's still in the faith. And even just like the masculine side, my dad's side. And so it's true. You can heal with people only so far, but sometimes you need to be with a different demographic of people to take it even further. And I think that's where there's just so much room for growth in the men's sector to just be and to just be comfortable enough to just let it go. Cause I'd imagine it probably has moved mountains for you.
Yeah, it's huge. It's, I'll speak about, there was an elder as I've run Circle and those types of spaces, I've kind of read up on them. And there was an elder that said once that being in Circle is an opportunity for each of us to be our own doctor. And what that means is that, if you have 20 people in a space, a circle, somebody might share something with you at any given time that you were just meant to hear that day. And you're like, that's why I'm here today. Whether I was in a good space, not a good space, whatever, I was here to hear what this person shared. And that's medicine that I'm going to take. In the same breath, if somebody shares something that is just, it's not in alignment with you or it doesn't feel like it's yours, then that's the medicine you don't take. So we get to pick and choose the things that the other gifts that others bring to Circle, what works for us. And that's the beauty of Circle, is that there's no hierarchy. We're all at that same space. And there's a funny thing that happens when we're in that circle that you can't hide. And when one person shares and opens, there's a natural way for things to flow, and then it's beautiful.
I'd be curious too, aside from like the emotional weight being lifted, was there anything physically that you felt shifted within your body as well when you went through that experience in Bali?
Yeah, it was like I said, it's still there. There's like a vulnerability piece, but also physical, almost like a hollowness. There's a lightness that I've begun to really appreciate and get in touch with, so just removing that. I often call it I think I referenced it as a small safe that nobody has the comm to or the key to, or like a big ball from a cannon that is just, nobody's penetrating this. But I always viewed it as what protected me. But it was actually what held me back and that held me down and stuff. So having that gone is just literally freed a part of me that, I'm 53, so probably the better part of 45 years carrying. But it was just so beautiful and tying everything together, right, from that image of all these men jumping into like this vortex, and then just laying there with such loving, supportive people, just really, really allowed me to go through it the way I needed to go through it. And, you brought up, I just want to jump back to when you brought up the feminine and the masculine, and how my mentor Henri kind of explained it to us, and how I really understand it is the feminine is all about receiving. We come into this world as babies, and we have no choice. We have to receive. We have to be taken care of. We have to have all our needs met. And the feminine is just about receiving. If we get that, and I'm probably saying things and the audience knows, if we get that, now we get to give from the right place, and that's the masculine. Give not to get anything back. There's no conditions. It's just, this is what we know life to be, and now this is why I can do this without conditions, without trying to get anything back. So the feminine to me is just all about learning how to receive. And typically most of us go through our life not having all those needs met. We got some of them, but there's so many needs that we never got met that cause us to go into roles, go into masks to try to get those needs met. And in return, when we do that, now we start to give to get. Right. So there's an imbalance here. So that's really helped me on my journey is to see the feminine and the masculine, especially with men specifically. They grab onto that one because every time I say, what does a feminine mean to you? And what does a masculine mean? Well, woman, man. And I'm like, okay, well, how about if we look at it this way? And they're like, I like that. Right. Because it's almost like you have approval to be feminine, because it's just about receiving. It's just about, right. So that piece there, when I went through that experience, I was able to receive all the love, all the support, all the gentleness and good words after, whereas I don't know if I would have been able to make sense of it. So it's, yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that just generally, do you find men do struggle with receiving?
Yeah, I find everybody struggles with receiving. I often say men because I typically work with men, but I work with women too. I work with couples. And again, not a counselor, not a psychologist, just somebody who wants to give back. But we all struggle with receiving in some aspect. And that version of feminine masculine works in many different situations and conversations that I have, because it's just an approval to see things in the way of, being young and being a baby and going, oh, I see, I have a starting point now as to why I can't receive. Whether mom and dad was an addiction, mom and dad were working, mom and dad weren't involved, whatever it was. Now there's a starting point. So it's kind of like, okay, so there's no real reason why you can't receive other than you didn't get your needs met when you're a baby. So it's just that little piece to go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And men specifically, it's like, can you just tell me so I can work on it? Can you just tell me so I can understand it? And that's the biggest thing is like, well, you didn't receive. And I almost to a person, I could almost guess what they didn't get, and it's not by any superpower I have, but just, you asking that question, it's like most of us never really truly got our needs met. And it's just about learning that and then putting ourselves in spaces and places to where we can start to receive and start to understand that, we don't do things to get things. We don't do things for somebody all of a sudden to help me now, so it's just kind of like, this is how it is. This is why we do it. And yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think a lot about the shared circle and why that's so crucial and how like we're mirrors to each other. I think about how, I think that we as a species are more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And with the knowledge to understand, yes, it doesn't make things go away overnight. The healing needs to be done. But the more work that you do, the more you have ability to lean into that intuition, and you can pick up on the hurt of.
Yeah, some of the most gifted people, that I've experienced in the last 6 years, and hundreds of men specifically, but are some of the most gifted people, and they never knew. They never knew that, but they just have these gifts that are starting to show up because they're willing, and one of the things I always say, and what I was taught is, we have a 40-year plan and we have a 10-year plan. The 40-year plan is where, we're kind of little bit committed, but not so committed that we're actually going to be consistent and disciplined with doing what we need to grow. So we find ourselves at the end of our life where we're kind of going, well, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have said this. And, and the 10-year plan is something where, I have a guy that's been coming to my groups, and I won't share a name, obviously, and I can share a bit of his story because he's allowed me to. And he grew up, in the streets of Edmonton, and right from a young age, he dealt with some of the most horrible trauma that you could ever experience. And, spent the most of his life drinking and drugging and going, having a really tough lifestyle. And in the last 10 years, we had an event about 10 years ago, and in the last 10 years, he's surrounded himself with so many supports, and I don't think he's missed more than a handful of my circles in 6 years. And then that's circles where I run here, there, and everywhere. And it's just his level of commitment, and it's been about 10 years. So he's been on what I call a 10-year plan, and just that commitment to heal and learn and pass those gifts on down. And so there's that long range, and then there's the 10-year plan, and then going to Bali really showed me there's even a 2-year plan or a 1-year plan where if you're committed, you can actually achieve deep things and surrounded by wonderful people. And it's it's a gift. And the best part I love about it all is it's all unscripted. People say, what do you do in Circle? What do you talk about? And the thing is I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're carrying, but it's that in some way, shape, or form, we're connected. Story's connected to yours somehow. And in Circle, there's a responsibility on my end as a facilitator to be able to work with whatever is there. And sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's hard, but I tell you, the work that can be done. And if you haven't guessed already how much I love Circle and sharing Circle, and
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, as you talk about your friend's story, people can only meet you as far as they met themselves. And I think despite, and I don't wish any hardship on anyone. And I don't think, unfortunately, anyone can go through this life unscathed. This is the nature of this human experience. But I guess my perspective has always been, to never let it be in vain. Does it give you the ability to have more empathy and compassion to what someone is going through and navigating? And it can be a wonderful gift, so that you maybe can make their weight a little bit lighter, make them feel a little bit more seen and understood, because there's nothing worse than what we're seeing now with mental health and addiction is people feel very, very isolated. The loneliness epidemic is crazy to this point. And I think we need more circles of people to be like, we're actually connected. And I think this is another thing that weaves into it. And I talk about this all the time. This is like kind of part of my philosophy. I really am fascinated by Dunbar's this scientific study that like we can only hold so many relationships, approximately 150, give or take. And I would love to break that number. I think that we as a species have the ability to have the capacity to hold space with as many people as we want. And we can maybe change that statistic. But at the same time, too, when I think about how we live in such densely populated communities, of course, we're seeing fragmented communities and people are getting left out. It creates this division. But what you're doing with, connected Circle, there's that level of accountability. There's that level of safety. And I just think we need to see more of it.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. And that's, I guess, the big part of the selfishness for me is that it's been such a gift to me and my family. And I continue to step into those places, obviously to be of service to others, but also because it helps me. It helps me connect. It helps me connect with others. It helps me grow. It helps me connect with myself. And that's the beauty of it all, is that, we throw around that authenticity part. And the scary thing is that we've created all these roles throughout our life just to survive. And that makes sense, and that's okay. But we usually typically hit the middle of our life and we kind of go, I'm done carrying these roles. I'm done doing things this way. I'm done being an addiction. And I see it often. And it's that piece of identifying, well, this is what you've done to survive your whole life. And it's not about forgetting. It's not about pushing it down. It's not about saying, I just want to live where I'm at now. It's that self-acceptance piece to go, there's a young part of us that's been scared that we need to bring back. And we need to continue to bring that young part of us back, not for what we've done, not for the people we've hurt, but the fact is that that's what's missing. There's that fractured piece where there's a part of us that still needs to be brought back. And it's something that is huge. So getting in touch with that young part of us again can be scary, though. It can be really scary.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would love to hear if there's any stories, any more impactful stories that you've had with individuals just over the past few years. I'd imagine that there's been moments where people have come to you at probably their lowest point, and to come out the other side, stronger, knowing that there is someone there on the other side, or there's a community of people supporting them.
Yeah, absolutely. My apologies. I see the thing freezing and it's kind of distracting me, but there's a particular gentleman and there's actually two stories I can share that this fella has shared with me many times that, he's had counseling, he's had psychologists, psychiatrists and stuff like that. And it just took for him and he pats me on the back more than he probably should, but it just took for him to put himself in a position where he's with other men and really connecting and getting to just really share who he is and his journey and stuff like that. And, he shares often that, Circle has really helped save his life. And I see that and I feel that from him. And again, there's so many stories. There's one about an indigenous fella, who grew up on the streets of Edmonton, tattooed everywhere, jewelry all over his body. And if you saw this gentleman on the street, you'd probably go to the other side of the street, but one of the most beautiful men I've ever met in my life. And he had been attending my circles for probably about 3 years. And, one day at the end of one of our circles, I said, a lot of times we have circle that is really powerful, really deep, and can be really hard. And I said, this particular circle, I said, I want each of us to go around and identify something that we're really proud of ourselves with. And it got to this gentleman and there was like a pause, like for minutes. And he was so committed to changing patterns and cycles from his lineage, because of residential school, because of addiction. And he finally looked at all of us and he said, I'm a good dad. And he said it from a place through my experience, he said it from a place that he really wanted to be present when he said it. He really wanted to mean what he said, but he wanted to feel it. And just those 4 words and the power that were behind them were amazing. And that was a really huge experience for me. But it's one of hundreds. It's one of hundreds and hundreds of stories and amazing things that happen in Circle and in those places. So yeah.
Yeah. So going forward, you're planning to do you have any big events coming up? Anything that you're excited about in regards to this work?
Yeah. Starting to get excited. I kind of feel spoiled, but a few months ago, I chose to go back to Bali. And I go there next month on the 20th. And people always say, "Oh, you're so lucky," and it's beautiful. The people there, I don't know if you've been, but I think anybody you talk to will say the experience and the people are just a different world. And it's the truth. But I'm going back to do another retreat, so it's 7 days of really intense work. And why I'm doing it is A, for myself, but B, because of what it's done for me and what I hope that it'll, give me to be able to also extend to others. So I'm doing that, and that's more on a personal thing that I know it'll affect my work. I recently just did a gender-based violence workshop with the Metis Nation of Alberta Justice Department. And throughout the year, we're scheduled to be in a few other places within Alberta to do that type of work as well. And it's for Métis men and boys. But it's for men, it's for boys, it's for our women, it's for our children, it's for our elders, it's for our Two-Spirit community, and you name it. It's all connected. So I'm doing those events. I have a couple other events that are still kind of in the works as well. So just really trying to get out there now and make a difference. And soon I'll be able to kind of do that 100%. So there's a few things I can't talk about yet, but there's some things in the work and I'm really looking forward to it. And on a personal standpoint
Amazing.
too, like just really being able to re-engage at home, because, there's a level of hypocrisy when I've been working with people and really looking at how busy I am and I'm not taking care of myself. So just really being able to engage at home and with my wife and spend some time with my children and my daughter. She's my child as well, but she's out in Victoria doing her thing and doing really awesome. So I'll get to go spend some time with her. And my boy's 15 and, they receive directly from the work that I do. And I'm just really looking forward to continuing that too.
It sounds amazing, everything that you're building. I've never been to Bali, but I've heard incredible things. I hear it's so healing. I've always wanted to go to some of the fountains and the old relics that they have there, because I guess just that space is all about healing and connection to nature. But I love your philosophy and everything that I'm picking up from you. It's not just the work that you're doing, it's the work that you're continuously doing on yourself so that you can continue to do this great work for the community.
Yeah. And that's 100% it. It's something that has, saved so much for me and, given me access to so many different places and relationships in my life that I don't know if I ever would have been able to. It's been a gift, and I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to, I've thrown his name out a couple times. I'm grateful to my mentor, Henri McKinnon, who, I now know I've known through many lifetimes, and, people get to believe based on their religion or their culture on whether they believe in that or not. I do, and his late wife, Val Forshaw, who really, or actually really modeled what it's like to really be loving parents. And that's not taking anything away from my parents and my upbringing, but they really modeled that for me. And I only say that because of that's what they've shown us and displayed. They've continued to do the work. They've continued to show up. And for that very reason, they do that much better of a job of being of service to others. So
yeah. I think we need mentors more than anything, and that in a variety of different ways. And I too, I've connected to several different couples that I would, maybe seek, in a permanent partnership in what they've built and what they've created. But also too, I have a few mentors that I lean towards, and I don't try to put pressure on them, but they're people that I really, really idolize in the sense that they hold so many core values. And yes, they continue to do that personal work, and they're able to maybe even reflect things in a different lens that you wouldn't see, within yourself, to give you a different perspective. But I think it is really the personal work that they continue to do, the self-awareness piece, because it doesn't end. I think in this lifetime, you can say that you've done all the work in the world, but it's a continuous carving, molding.
Yeah. It's, you're so right. It's continual. I kind of have this little teaching that I do with the, because I'm Métis, there's that infinity piece. And then the infinity piece itself is, we go through life. And, we go through life and we go down, and it's a struggle, and then things get better, and we continue to do that infinity piece, and we go down again, and we start saying things like, man, I thought I worked on this. I thought I dealt with that. And truth is we have, but it's just another layer, and then things get better. And we do this, we do this over and over again. And when I'm using this as a teaching tool, I say, don't get scared, because it's not always going to be like this. But what we're doing is as we grow at the top, and we find those people that we just spoke about that support us and that we learn from, they now become part of our support when we're going down to those depths. And it's, and eventually what happens is when we surround ourselves with healthy family, healthy people, and a healthy community, it now becomes this. And now it's just like this, it's still infinite, but it's not as high. It's not as low, but it's balanced. And it's like you said, it's continual. It happens all the time. And when we get that, when some of us get that visual, it's like, okay, I know things are going to be tough, but I know things are going to be good, but they don't have to be so extreme, which screams to when you think you can do it on your own, you get reminded really quickly that you can't,
Absolutely. So where can the audience learn more about your work and access some of your tools and resources, or potentially join a circle?
So I've got a few different things that I do. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll probably, when this airs, I'll be done with working at Bent Arrow, which is both a sad chapter, but they'll always be close to my heart, and I'll work there in some capacity. So I run a few different men's groups, men's sharing circles. So one of those is at Panther Boxing Club. I'm with my good friend Benny Swanson and his wife Cindy. They've got a beautiful thing going on there. I've run circles at Indigenous Psychological Services. I've done circles with the Métis Nation of Alberta, and that's an online one every Monday. And from there, it's just growing outwards. More people are kind of approaching and reaching out, and it's just, trying to find places and spaces to have for our men. It's a youth organization in the West End, in West Edmonton Mall, and they're actually at quite a few rural sites, and it's literally a wraparound program for our youth. And when I walked into that space specifically, and they asked what I thought, and I said, this is the family that we all should have grown up in, because as soon as somebody walks into that space, the workers there just attune right away with whoever it is, and they make them feel safe and comfortable. So for the younger males, I run a group there every second Wednesday night. And so you can reach me at my email at KIYAM.connections@gmail.com. That's my company email. And through there, I can kind of direct direct you from there. I don't have a website up yet. There's lots of transitions happening, and it's kind of, this interview's kind of right in the middle of all that. But trust me when I say that, I'll be putting myself out there as much as I can, and creating opportunity and spaces for not only men, but men is a big part of what I do. But it seems to almost be the kind of thing that where we're getting back to where, okay, well, who do we need to re-engage in our family and our community? And it's the men. So yeah, I'm not sure I answered that specifically because of the transition, but that's a little bit about how they can find me.
No, that's perfect. But thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that we can follow up to learn more about your work and updates and all the progress that you make.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the work you do. And thank you for sharing the little bits and pieces that you did. And it's really nice when you find people who are in alignment and have the same level of understanding of the importance of not just healing and doing our own work, but also being able to give back. So I honor the work you do as well.